Here we have an Aiwa AD-F810 I've just taken charge of. It was reported as not working, so let's see what it does or doesn't do. So we've definitely got power, but it made a strange noise. These Aiwas have a demagnetized system, and also just take up any slack in a cassette when you turn on or put a tape in. So that sound wasn't typical. Sounded like something was slipping. Let's just see if anything moves. Okay, so we do have some movement on that, but it sounds like it's slipping on something. The capstan probably is not moving. Yeah, I can see nothing seems to be happening there. So I think it's probably a belt that's probably disintegrating or slipping. So let's have a look inside. Okay, so this is inside, and immediately we can see, well, that's part of what used to be the belt. So, yep, the belt is no longer a belt. So that's the first thing I'll need to order. I've taken the main board out, which is relatively easy with the screws. The most difficult thing was removing one of these knobs off the front. One of them was a bit stuck. The others were easy, but not a huge problem. I just wanted to check on the underside for any dry joints, anything obvious that looked like it might be a problem in the future. I'm particularly suspicious of things like this, these transistors or regulators, particularly where there might be a lot of thermal expansion and contraction. So on the whole, I mean, you won't be able to see on the camera, but on the whole, I don't see any big problems. But that transistor, or that device, whatever it is, yeah, it is a transistor. It's Q401. The pads here do look a little bit as if they are just starting to form cracks. So I'm going to reflow that just for good measure, and maybe this one up here and anything else I see that looks even slightly suspicious while I'm here. I don't want to have to take it apart in the future just because I didn't do some corrective resoldering here. So also I'm spraying contact cleaner into these pots here around the back, and there's a hole underneath here which allows some to go in and through the shaft there. So that should hopefully improve the carbon track connectivity, and going through this shaft will free up some of the old grease that made them quite stiff, and now they are turning much more freely, so that's an added benefit. So to take this front panel off, which has the mechanism attached, there are two easy screws on the black plastic here, one each side, and then there should be two other screws on this metal chassis here and here, which should be easy to take out. This one indeed was easy. This one wasn't. This almost seemed like it had been over tightened or something, and when you unscrewed it, it was just spinning round. So I had to undo the screw that holds on the foot, so I could push the screw from the other side. So it was all a little bit more difficult than you'd hope. But anyway, so now I've got this off. I want to clean the potentiometer, the main volume, so this board is going to have to come off. You can see some screws and some plastic clips, so that should be straightforward. And then after that I will have a look at the mechanism. Oh, there's another potentiometer on this board for the headphone volume, which was very scratchy, so I'll need to remove this and work on that. And indeed it was easy to remove this, so we've got good access to the potentiometer. I'll be able to get some contact cleaner in there, so that should improve that. I might just put some in these switches as well, just for good measure, while I'm here. And this vacuum fluorescent display has this filter on it, which has got some fine dust on it, so I'll be giving that a clean as well. Alright, so I've taken the mechanism out from this plastic front, just a few obvious screws. That's relatively straightforward. You can take the buttons off the front and clean them, which is what I've done. And I'm struggling at the moment to get the board that has the headphone control and output jack. I was thinking sometimes there's a hidden nut on these on this side, so I took off the metal fascia, which is just unclipped along the top and the bottom there, but that didn't reveal anything, so I'm still looking on this side. I don't know whether you can see, but there are plastic supports that this definitely slots into, but it doesn't seem to want to come out at all, and of course I don't want to give too much force there to break it, so that's my next challenge, really, to work out how to remove it without breaking anything. Alright, so you can see I've managed to remove it. What I did, I looked on the schematic to see the shape of the circuit board, because I was convinced there must be some way that the black plastic casing had formed the clips that were securing the board, and indeed you can see here and at the top here little well, that shape, whatever you call that, that hooks into these pieces of plastic. So if you push those down and up and jiggle it in turn, it will come out. So yeah, that's the trick. So turning attention to the mechanism, there are 3 small screws and then one longer one here on this corner, which gives us access to the motor and where the belt should be, if there was a belt, if it hadn't disintegrated and turned into a gooey mess all wrapped around the motor shaft here. So I've got to get all that out and use some Propane 2-Ol to clean all that out. I will clean round the surfaces of the capstans, although they look relatively clean actually, but I'll do that anyways, part of the course. Clean off the old grease here, put some new grease on there. Probably I'll take off the capstans, so I can just put a spot of oil in the bearing. So you've got to note that on each of the capstans there are little washers there which need to be removed, not lost, not broken, and that stops any oil that you might put in these bearings from leaking out onto the capstan here and contaminating the tape path, which would be a bad thing. So yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, I think that's next, and then hopefully soon the new belts will arrive and we can try those. Here you see I've got the belt gunk off, so that's looking pretty clean. So I am just going to try and oil the motor a bit. So I've got some sewing machine oil, some very light oil, and just put it on the end of a little screwdriver, and I'm just going to try and get it down there into the bearing in that gap. It's not really enough room when it's on the plate, so yeah, I think I can just put a little bit in there just in case it's starting to get a little bit dry inside. Yeah, I'm going to do that now. Taking off the capstans makes it easier to clean down the full length, but beware, there are springs and washers there. The washers tend to get stuck when you remove them on here, and if you don't know, they might just fall off at some random point later. So take those off and put them down the shaft to keep them safe. Going to put a little spot of oil there. On the other side, I've done a general clean of the tape path with Propane 2-Ol, and for the rubber pinch rollers, I'm using Rubber Renew. Very smelly stuff, but should help to keep the rubber here from cracking and aging quite so quickly. So that's the next step, I think. Then I've got to decide whether to investigate underneath here, because there's a rubber idler wheel here which drives the forward and rewind. That can age, and I'd like to do the same Rubber Renew on that, and maybe some lubrication around here as well. In order to get better access and to remove this whole plate, this black plate which connects to the heads, you need to remove these two screws on the bottom plate to give you access at the front, and then this assembly here has one screw here which attaches to these brakes. So those rubber pads are something to look at. These look quite in good condition, so might just give them a quick clean for good measure, but those I think are okay. And then there's this spring here which you can unpick carefully, and then that means this whole assembly should come off. It should do, but doesn't seem to want to come off, at least not one-handed, so it might be fouling against these. I think you have to move these out of the way, so I'll do those when I've got two hands. So initially I thought I'd have to remove these pinch wheelers because they seem to be blocking this head mechanism from coming up, but I realised in actual fact there's this metal bar with just two screws there, and these pieces of metal here were fouling this block. So without them you can sort of move it backwards and forwards and just lift it up with some jiggling, so it comes out like so, and that gives you access to lubricate the inside, the underside here where it moves, and you can see there's some white grease there. I'll probably replace that. It doesn't look too bad, but I'll do that a bit later. But more importantly is to look at this idler wheel here. So on previous Aiwa deck and others in general, in fact, when the wheel motor turns, it needs to have enough friction on this rubber to not slip, and not slip on these. There's actually a clutch mechanism here, I believe, but this rubber, I need to investigate that, put some Rubber Renew on, and maybe even roughen it up with some sandpaper, very fine sandpaper if necessary. So if you take apart this part of the mechanism in a bit of a rush like I did, you may not notice how everything fits together, so it might take you a while to work it out. So the underside of this white wheel, there's a white extension, and that's got to go into a tab underneath this wheel, so that's got to fit in there. But also on the bottom side of this wheel assembly there are tabs which go over and under this metal plate. So I'd initially got them all over, so it was too high, and it was then fouling the mechanism that goes on top, and then this little spring has to go into this hole and underneath the little tiny plastic clip there, so it seats properly and gives the right amount of spring force. So yeah, just be careful around here because there are some fiddly bits which need to go in properly. So here's the two belts in place now, back together. The metal bracket here holds the flywheels down on the bearings. I've just put some more grease on there, and it's running quite smoothly now. The belt kit comes with two belts, of course, one slightly longer and wider than the other. The service manual doesn't really help because it just says belt A and belt B. it seems like the smaller belt goes from capstan to capstan, and the bigger one here, slightly wider and slightly longer, is the one that goes around the motor and then this main flywheel. So everything is back together. I think everything is good, but I think now is the time to test and see if there's another fault that I haven't noticed or if things are looking good. Just one point of note, the head cables, unlike previous decks, they're not actually screened, interestingly. They do sort of have twisted pairs, I guess, so maybe that's sufficient for eliminating any interference, but just yeah, I just thought that was interesting to see. So the mechanism is back in the unit. I did have some trouble with this connector here. I was struggling to get it in. It seems like any slight tilt means that it's hard to get in, so in the end I just had to make sure I was absolutely straight on, and then it seemed to just go in like a charm. But yeah, I had a bit of trouble with that initially for some reason. So yeah, I've put a tape in, and well, it looks, basic functioning is working. I have, oh, you may just notice here the headphone volume control. Somehow I've managed to drop that. I cannot find it in the workshop. I'm hoping it'll turn up eventually before I step on it and break it or something, but that's annoying. But yeah, such is life. But as you can see, it's playing back an old comedy tape quite respectably there. All the functions seem to work with good torque. So I think what I'm going to do, I'm just going to play a couple of tapes on it, let it bed in, and then maybe this evening I'll start doing some electrical adjustments on the tape speed, which is controlled by a little potentiometer inside the motor. So that's important when you change any of the belts. Usually the speed regulation needs to be adjusted. The azimuth, traditionally you can get through these holes once the cover is removed, and then there'll be playback sensitivity controls and so on, which I will look at adjusting with the help of a test tape I got many years ago, hardly ever used, but that should have some test tones on there which will help the adjustments. So for no obvious reason, I thought I would start with the MPX filter calibration. So I'm feeding in a 19 kilohertz or thereabouts test tone onto the right channel, and you can see a lot of signal there. And the idea of this filter is that it filters out a deep notch at 19 kilohertz. That was a signal that old FM tuners may leak out, the pilot tone, into the audio channel, which would affect the Dolby tracking. So the idea is that you adjust the cores in these two coils with a ceramic screwdriver, so you don't break the cores with the metal one, and just tune them so that they null out at 19 kilohertz. So I'm going to switch on the filter there, and you can see dramatic reduction in signal, so that's good. And then I've just adjusted the cores to tune it to maximum null at the 19 kilohertz. And you can see if I go higher up to about 22, we get more signal. If we go back down lower to about 15, 10, something like that, we get more signal again. So that's working. However, I noticed something interesting. If I'll take off the MPX filter there for this, if I just keep the balance not full right but in the mid position where you would normally have it, you get quite a lot of signal on the left channel. So I'm putting in only signal into the right channel at about +6 dB, and I'm getting, I don't know, -25 or something on the left. Where is that coming from? Well, I realised that's probably coming from this big unscreened flat cable which has the audio in and out. I think there's a lot of signal coming from that, just crosstalk. So that's not very good. So I'm thinking I need to make a bit of a modification and screen that cable. To check the record bias oscillator, I've got the scope on the test point here. That's the bottom of C307. If we need to, we can adjust the frequency here on that core, but actually it should be 108 kilohertz ±1, and it's looking spot on, so no adjustment needed there, but if that is a problem, that's how you do it. Alright, so you can see I've taken everything apart again. So what was happening was I was using the headphone output, and the volume control was much better in the sense that the contact cleaner I'd put in the first time had stopped the scratchiness, the poor contacts. And so my initial first test was positive. However, when I was using it for a bit longer, there was a strange sort of effect. So what was happening was that, well, for a start, the control seemed a lot freer and easier to move than the other pots. That was a little bit unusual, but not particularly a problem. But the problem on the audio was that, yes, I could increase the volume to the maximum and decrease it in the normal way, but it somehow didn't seem linear, or it seemed like at the beginning of the track it didn't make any difference until it somehow got near the middle. Then it increased the volume towards the end, and then it would be kind of a normal kind of change of volume as you turned it. But then when you're going the other way, the same thing in reverse, so that when you were reducing the volume, the first bit didn't seem to make any difference until you got to near the end. And I was thinking about that overnight, what that could possibly be, and I imagined that inside the actual carbon wiper had become disconnected from the rod, and yet it sort of pushed it once it got past halfway somehow. So that was the only way I could imagine something physical happening such that I got the effect that I was hearing. So I've taken it apart, well, I mean, as far as that board, with the idea that I need to look inside that potentiometer. And actually, even before I do that, I had a look while I was turning it with one of these head-mounted magnifying glass things, which I actually just got this a couple of weeks ago from Amazon. Just in the middle of the back, you can see, well, I can see, probably can't pick it up on the camera, but you can just see the end of a plastic spindle that should be presumably connected all the way through to the main control. And indeed, I can see exactly what I imagined last night, that as I'm turning it, you only see this end, the back end, turning at the extreme left and extreme right once you sort of get past roughly halfway. So I think that must be indeed some kind of broken connection inside. So I'm going to have to unsolder it, take it apart, clean off all the contact cleaner from the plastic, and see if I can glue it, melt it back or something, because it's unlikely I'm going to find a control that just fits perfectly into this PCB mount. That's unfortunate when they're not kind of bolted or got a screw thread in and a nut on the fascia. Those at least you could wire in sort of separately from the PCB if needed, but here, because it's all mounted on the PCB, that's a bit trickier. But, well, you know, I've repaired some switches by taking them apart before, so actually, even look, that's looking like it's wobbling more than it should. So yeah, well, we'll take it apart, see what we can do, and go from there. I've removed the offending potentiometer. Just looking at how to get inside, it looks like on this side these 4 plastic grey protrusions, those must be holding in the metal frame. So I think I'm going to have to cut those off. They must have been pushed in and then heat expanded over the top, I think. So a plan is to cut those off, get the metal out, and then, well, see what happens. I'm thinking I'll be able to glue it back together again somehow. We'll see. So, disassembled a bit further, the metal case comes off easily, as I thought. Then this 2-part plastic construction comes apart with just sharp pliers or a knife. And so this centerpiece here, I don't know whether you can see, there's a tiny little black piece of plastic there, which should be the center of this control rod that goes through to the knob, and that's where it's split off. The centerpiece there should be joined. So whether I can get this out and reattach it, don't know, but we'll see what we can do. Well, I don't know whether this will hold, but I've managed to dip the little piece of plastic that was broken off into some CA glue, and, well, it's attached. I don't know how strong it's going to be, but this is what it's supposed to be, sort of with the flat bit behind and pointing to the right. You can't really see on the camera, but the bit that sticks out here should have a notch that goes up, and that is what I'm trying to indicate there. So anyway, that's sort of, it's not quite straight on the axis, but anyway, we'll try it and see if it works, and if it doesn't, I'll have to think of something else. And this is it put together. I've had to glue these 4 spots around the top metal plate. Those are the plastic bits that I had to break. So, yep, well, let's put it in and see if it holds. So it's sort of working. I mean, it does now control the volume throughout the full range of the control, which is good. There's a slight problem at the absolute minimum. It sort of plops when you get to that. I don't know whether that will be picked up on the camera. So I don't know whether you caught that, but I think it may be that the notch now is not quite aligned properly or something, and maybe it's disconnecting completely from the potentiometer, so there's a bit of DC getting through as you connect or disconnect the signal path, something like that. I think I'm going to have to live with that for the moment. I mean, it doesn't really matter. You're not going to need to turn it right the way down. It's not going to cause any damage, so I'll just have to live with that, see if that is strong enough to survive normal, careful use. And I think I'll move on to other things. When I was trying to set the azimuth, I was trying to use this screw here, and being perplexed why it wasn't changing anything. Then I consulted the service manual, and actually it says up here, you see the erase head adjustment, which I am not going to play with, is right next to here, the azimuth. So actually it's down here, and so I don't know whether the camera will pick that up, but there is a tiny little gap that you can put a screwdriver down there, and that actually is the azimuth. screw. Now I couldn't move that at all. You can see on the erase bolt here that there is some black goo, and there's similar sort of black goo paint further down. So what I had to do, I had to try and loosen that, and I got a little pick, just a tiny drop of propanone on the end, and managed to get it down in the top side and just let it soften the paint or whatever it is. So I can now just about move it. So I'm going to put it back in the chassis, and now I should be able to make some azimuth adjustments. So I've got the test tape in, and I'm going to be adjusting the azimuth screw here now I've loosened it. Watching on the oscilloscope here, I've got it in split mode with an XY display on the bottom. So if we start, if I can do this one-handed, we can see there, as I adjust, the phase goes in and out, left and right. So we just adjust so the liaison figure on the bottom is as close as possible to a sort of stable line there, rather than a sort of oval, and that's pretty much it. Okay, so I've been using this deck to play a few of my old tapes, some of which have sounded pretty good, some of them not so much, sort of depends on the tape. You know, there's definitely some speed irregularities due to kind of the modulation on the tape surface, the dropout kind of things, or, you know, partial dropouts. But there is a sort of artifact on Dolby C, which most of my tapes were recorded in back in the day. So Dolby C, as you may know, has a kind of double Dolby recording and opposite in playback, whereby the volume is changed. So for a given starting volume, if the volume goes down a little bit, let's say, then on playback the Dolby circuit pushes the volume even further down and progressively further for lower sounds. So the idea is that it pushes the noise floor further down, and then on recording you would have done the opposite to cancel the effects out. And that generally works quite well when you've got a well calibrated deck, and particularly recording and playback on the same machine. It was always a bit problematic though if you were playing back on a different machine, because you tend to have a different azimuth, a different calibration, and so on. And I'm hearing on some of these tapes now a kind of pumping effect, whereby these lower parts of the recording are coming back off the tape, or you can hear them at a lower volume than they should be. And so that's a kind of annoying artifact. So I'm thinking that there should be some other calibrations that I might want to do, particularly something like playback sensitivity, that if I can increase the sensitivity and increase the volume coming off the tape into the Dolby circuit, then it won't push the volume down quite as much, and maybe we'll avoid that sort of pumping effect. The problem is, of course, that I don't have any of these test tapes. I don't even know what they would be in terms of what tones they would be, or what levels they would be at. So I'm a little bit loathed to mess around too much. And some of these descriptions here just don't seem to make any sense. Look at this. Adjust these coils, fine, so that the DC voltage at the test points is in the record standby mode. What does that mean? Surely it should be telling me what DC voltages I should be measuring. Seems like there's some words missing. I don't know. So that's a bit weird. I did look on the circuit and I found the coils and the test points, but there's no voltages shown that I can see. So annoyingly, also the test tape that I did buy several years ago, it came with a sheet of A4 to describe all of the tones and the levels, and I seem to have lost it. I can't find it, so I kind of want to wait until I've found that, hopefully, before making some of these adjustments, because I'd like to know, what tone is at the Dolby level. So that's the level shown here at -3 dB. That's the standard Dolby level on this calibration. So different manufacturers. Well, there's a few different standards, 2 or 3. You'll tend to find the Aiwas have Dolby at -3, but they should have a little symbol, regardless of what dB it's shown. The reference point could be different, but the Dolby actual recording level should be the same. So what I mean is the meters might be calibrated differently, but the Dolby level should be the same. So I don't think I'm going to play with these settings just now. Certainly not on this video. I'll leave that for a bit later. But just before I go, I just thought I'd make some comments on this deck as a whole. Is it a good deck? Is it something you should try to get a second-hand one? Well, I guess it's not a bad deck if you can get one at a decent price that you can repair. You've seen it's relatively easy to do some basic repairs on the mechanism. It's got a decent, dual capstan 3-head mechanism with good flywheels. The belts are, pretty easy to replace. Good clean interior. I mean, it's a bit cheap, construction and all that, but easy to get at. Unlike some of the higher end earlier models, like the 990, I think it was it? The one with built-in calibration, sort of automatic calibration. They were just massive wires. You can see some videos on YouTube. Very difficult, I think, to service. Way more complicated. So this later vintage, is easier to service. In terms of kind of features and things, I mean, Dolby BC is pretty standard. Doesn't have Dolby S, which some of the later Sony decks had. Does have HX Pro for recording, although I'm never going to really use this for recording now. It'll just be for playing back my old tapes. I mean, some of these things make me laugh, though. Discrete circuit, well, that's just a lie. I mean, it's not discrete. I mean, not that that would be a good thing particularly, but it's a couple of chips. There's no way discrete. You've got like a light for AMTS, whatever use that is. I think it was referring to this thing on the case, or the way the door and the mechanism here push against the cassette case. I don't know. Seems pointless making a light. This thing here annoys me, where you've got a minus infinity pair of lights. I mean, that's subtly pointless. But relatively minor things. It does have fine bias and record sensitivity, which is good. The top here, although it's not straight, this is something the Aiwa decks often had, which was to try and help you to select the bias. I mean, it would be better just to listen and work out what biasing to use to flatten the frequency response at the high end. But this was to try and help you, I suppose. If you had a particular tape, you could easily set the bias. I mean, that would have been okay when it came out, but manufacturers tended to change the formulations a bit over the years. So things that were long running like TDK-D and so on may well change their formulations, but still. What else? It does have the volume control, which, although very simple thing, you might be surprised some of the Aiwas didn't have the AD-F810. My original deck didn't have that, which was, well, frustrating to say the least. I had to make my own volume control and fit it to the back. 660 just had a switch on the back, high-low settings. Yeah, crazy. The tape counter is sort of, it says it's a linear counter, and it looks like it's minutes and seconds. It isn't really. It's not really accurate to minutes and seconds. It's sort of something approaching that. So whether that matters is a good thing or bad thing, I don't know. It's just a tape counter, I suppose. But yeah, don't let it fool you into thinking it's an accurate minutes and seconds. And overall, yeah, it sort of sounds okay, bearing in mind that, the tapes you're going to be using are getting on now. Any new tapes will not compare particularly favourably to the best of the old tapes, but the old tapes are old, and so they will be getting worn probably, and some of them might be flaking oxide and so on. So it's probably either to capture and archive old tapes, or just use for nostalgic purposes for old guys like me. Yep, I think that's probably all I have to say, really. So yeah, probably a reasonable choice to get if you can get a second-hand one at a reasonable price. But yeah, it's no Nakamichi or Tandberg or top-end Sony. But anyway, thanks for watching.